to
Such
Social
a nasty
Security
woman.
trust.
Nasty women are tough. Nasty women are smart. And nasty women vote.
America is still a great country, and it is still worth fighting for.
I'm not giving up, and neither should you.
Hi, this is a special episode of Nasty Women Nation. I'm Kara Lee. I am usually one of the people who is a part of the roundtable discussion. This time, though, it's just a one-on-one, and I talked to a woman named Maria. She's an employee at a state university in Texas. She is not a fan of Trump, or as she calls him, 45, but you'll figure that out pretty quickly. I talked to Maria about the election, the aftermath, and how this is affecting all the people around her. I want to start by getting an idea of where you are at right now, like where you personally are, your family, in the wake of the election. How are you doing?
So I think I'm very politically engaged now, and I think it's difficult because I do have family members who support 45, and so not being able to have those conversations because I've tried to understand their perspective and why they chose to support this president, and I struggle with their support because I feel like they basically voted for a candidate who represents everything opposite of what I stand for and what I believe in. I want people to feel equal. I want equal pay for women. I want, people of color to feel that they're welcomed here, that immigrants and refugees are welcome here. And by showing support for him and putting him in office, I just feel that we're on opposite sides of a political spectrum and really can't find a commonality because I disagree with everything about him. And so even if they didn't vote for him because of immigration, or they voted for him because they hated Hillary and thought she was he would be lesser of two evils, I can't find a way to have that conversation with them. So there's certain folks where I just can't even talk about politics and can't talk about the state of our country. And it gets really frustrating knowing that there's this barrier with certain family and certain friends, and there's certain people I don't follow on Facebook anymore because I don't want to read their posts because they're so supportive of this new environment, and that scares me. On the other hand, I have found a lot of like-minded people to support and mobilize and to be a part of larger protests and trying to, again, get my voice heard. Instead of calling representatives, I've handwritten letters, and I have a friend who's going to be able to drop those off personally next week. And not that I think it'll make a difference, but if someone in that office can at least read the concerns from one of their constituents, maybe it'll give them pause, and maybe it'll give them an opportunity to try to challenge the way this administration has already started. We're 12 days in, and we've already seen a lot of chaos.
Let's take a quick look back, and I want you to tell me about your family. Give us some context for what's happening there. Your mom, your dad.
Correct.
Where are they from?
So my dad is from Mexico, and when my mom is an American citizen, Mexican-American background, and when they got married, they lived in a border town on the Mexico side, and as she started to go into labor, story has it that as she started to go into labor to give birth to me, they rushed across to the American side. I don't know that it was that dramatic, but I think her intention was always for me to be a citizen of the U.S., and not that I wouldn't have gone through the process of green card and become a naturalized citizen, but I thanked her kind of jokingly, kind of in very serious tones, that I was born here and I could vote in this last election because I think it was critical that voices were heard. And even though I was not happy with the results, I very much appreciated, I think, more so than even getting a chance to vote for Obama. This was the first election where I really felt that there was somebody who represented me to a certain extent. I think President Obama did that as a man of color, but to have a female in the White House, I don't think I ever envisioned really the day when I would get to vote for a candidate like her. And so I made sure to thank my mom for doing that for me and having me on this side of the border. My dad is still not a citizen of the U.S., but, having been married to someone for a very long time, I don't think we necessarily worry about him getting sent back. However, if he tried to travel to Mexico, he would not have the documentation to get back. So for him, I think there's a piece that's missing because he can't visit extended family that still live there without taking a risk, unfortunately.
How much family does he still have? Like, are his parents still around or no?
No, my grandfather died when I was very young. My grandmother eventually moved and was here on this side and died a few years ago. But he's got cousins, I think. Mainly it's cousins now, like even aunts and uncles have passed away, but it's more of the folks who are kind of in his age range and their kids. We've still got family on that side.
Since your dad is not a citizen of the United States, since he wasn't able to vote, how is he viewing the election and everything that's happening around it?
It's interesting because he has raised two pretty independent women, and I think he is surprised by how involved I've tried to get more recently with protesting over the weekend and being vocal about who I supported. So I think he's a little surprised. I think for him, and it's interesting because I think an uncle who did vote voted for 45. And so I think for my dad, I think, it doesn't impact him necessarily. So I think he has a little bit of distance, which is unfortunate. And I think a lot of people kind of feel that way. It doesn't personally impact them. So they just think, well, I don't need to worry about that. But I think if the travel ban has shown us anything, it's just, this is a president who will write executive orders without really thinking things through and is okay with unleashing chaos. And that, to me, is a very dangerous way of leading. So regardless of where my family is concerned, they're more focused, I think, on their family, just kind of immediate family. I think for me, I'm trying to think big picture, and it's hard sometimes to have a strong voice within that big picture, but I think we have to be able to find our collective voice in order to make some changes happen, hopefully.
When you say that your uncle voted for 45, which I should mention is something that a lot of people have taken to calling Trump, instead of calling him PT, which I can't even bring myself to say. How is that uncle related? Is that like your dad's sibling or your mom's sibling? Oh, it was your dad's sibling.
And so all of my, it's funny because back in the 80s, it was easier to go through and become a citizen if you came from Mexico. And so all of my dad's brothers and sisters, except for him, became citizens of the U.S. And I saw my uncle after the election, and he kind of jokingly was like, well, we got to talk, and basically said everything, was opposite. Like, I'm pretty vocal about who I supported on Facebook, and that's where he would see some of my posts and messages. And I really didn't want to talk about it, so we didn't. Like, I think from a business standpoint, I'm guessing he was coming from a conservative fiscal standpoint and thought that 45 would be the better option. But this is, a man who has a daughter and who has an ex-wife. But, you have women around you. And I think that was the hardest group, I think, for me to understand who voted for him for 45 are women. I really struggle with any woman who voted for him because of the things that he has said, how he has behaved towards women, and I just don't understand why you think it would be okay to put that type of man in office.
Do you actually have family members who see things the way that you do? Do you have support there as well?
I do. I have extended family support and my husband. So I think, and then I've got like a core group of friends. that again have been protesting or who are posting similar things to what I've seen on, what I post on Facebook. So there is definitely support around me, and I think that's what we all have to keep doing, is kind of finding our like-minded folks, and I guess that's part of it. Part of the bigger picture that's a problem is that we can't find this commonality, and that's why things get stuck. And that's why President Obama had such a hard time trying to get anything done in his 8-year tenure. And Republicans forget how much they blocked him from trying to make the change and make things happen. And they've already expressed dismay that the Democrats are doing the same thing. And I think that's why I think that's how we kind of ended up in this mess with 45 as president.
As far as going to work when you're not around your family, what is that environment like, especially in these, couple of weeks post-election?
Oh my gosh, it's been crazy. So we have a lot of international students on our campus, not many that are directly impacted by the current travel ban, but we have a lot of Muslim students who are concerned about will that travel ban extend eventually to the country where they are from? Will 45 introduce legislation or an executive order in regards to H-1 visas or other types of visas that allow students to be here? So there's a lot of concern on campus, both for international students and then I think also for our domestic students who perhaps have extended family in those areas. We know of at least one student who's graduating in May whose family originates from one of those 7 countries, and with the ban extending pretty close to graduation, chances are that student's family is not going to be able to be here for that event, for that student. So when you work so hard to graduate with a degree and your family has supported you and spent all this money to send you to the States for a good education, and to not be able to see that final result is very disturbing. So I think the climate on our campus has been where students are just very concerned and they're scared, and we've made sure that they know Counseling Services is here for you. We have an international office who can assist. We've got other offices who can outreach to certain populations, but it's difficult because I do have someone around me on a regular basis who voted for 45 and who supported his leadership. And so I kind of, again, have to turn that off. And this person on campus is in a position where they could, there was concern in November after the election about racist acts that people were going to act out towards African Americans or Latinos. And this student leader really couldn't wrap his head around why a statement needed to be made at a student government meeting. And I think he still doesn't understand that our international community, students who maybe they're not from those countries, but they have family in those countries, I really think he still doesn't understand why there's so much concern on campus for these students.
And people have tried to explain this to him and try to talk it through, and he's just not getting it?
I told him back in November, I was like, do you not understand? Do you not see the news? There are instances, very clearly documented instances of students on campuses or students walking in town. I've heard a staff member on this campus was basically told, hey, 45 is in charge, you're going to have to go home. This was to a staff member who served in our military. So there are, and so, yes, you can, and that's my problem with 45 supporters, is that you can give them clear examples of even green card folks and visa holders who have been detained in airports because of this travel ban, and they think, oh no, national security, that's a priority. Okay, but you are targeting a religion. We don't have religious tests here in the U.S. Freedom of religion is still a thing. So I have a hard time. I struggle with the conversations because they don't even understand. They're not buying, they're buying into that whole fake news, or they're buying into oh, you're just a liberal and CNN is feeding you all this information. I'm going to listen to Fox News. Great. because Fox News misreported who, the background of the mosque in Canada, their shooter, kept identifying him as the